The Toyota Celica has had a roller coaster of history, but in my opinion, this generation of Celica doesn't get enough love. This one is swapped with a Toyota Beams engine in it, an engine I have zero experience with. And I have to say, it is one of the most unique driving experiences out of a Japanese car I've ever had. So should we give this Celica more of a chance? And what is the Beams engine like? Let's go for a drive and find out. Before we move on with today's video, I just want to give a huge thanks to today's sponsor, Upstart. For many people, getting financially healthy means dropping the weight of credit card debt. But where do you start when it feels like a never-ending cycle? Upstart can help you pay off your existing debt quickly and easily with a personal loan so you can start living your life. Whether it's paying off credit cards, consolidating high-interest debt, or funding personal expenses, over 1 million people have used Upstart to get one fixed monthly payment with a clear payoff date. Upstart knows you're more than just your credit score. And rather than looking at your credit score alone, Upstart's model considers other factors like your income, employment, and other information provided in your loan application to find you a smarter rate for your loan. And you can check your rate without impacting your credit score in just 5 minutes for loans between $1,000 and $50,000. And you can even receive funds as soon as 1 business day after accepting your loan. So find out how Upstart can lower your monthly payments today when you go to upstart.com/blue or click the link in the description below. That's upstart.com/blue. Don't forget to use our URL to let them know we sent you. Today, ladies and gentlemen, we are in a 1997 Toyota Celica. The first Celica I ever drove was actually the very first one. And that was the Mustang ripoff, essentially. It looked a lot like a old school muscle car. I actually really dug it. It had a 1UZ Lexus V8 in it with a Terminator Cobra supercharger with A86 suspension. When I think of Celica, for us who grew up in the 90s, this one I think of a lot. This is the 6th gen. And the 6th gen Celica, for a lot of people, doesn't intrigue people a lot because in the US we got kind of screwed with the Celica. Essentially, we didn't get the cool one in layman's terms. We got a 1.8 and a 2.2. 2.2 was good, but it was really slow. But across the water, essentially there was the GT4, and that's the one people tend to think of when they think of the cool Celica. GT4, turbo engine, all-wheel drive, rally car, rally monster, great rally history. Was good. It did really good in rally, and so it has this really cool legendary status around it, and we can finally import the GT4. So they're kind of starting to come back into people's minds as this classic JDM cool car. But let's talk about this one. This one in particular is great. It's owned by my buddy RJ here in Las Vegas. RJ was out in Germany. He was stationed out there for the military. He's driven this car on the Nürburgring. I mean, that's such an amazing story. He got restationed, new orders, you know how it can go if you're in the military. Got new orders, came all the way back to the States, and it's still a trooper. It has over 200,000 miles on it. And it has the Toyota Beams engine in it. The Beams engine, the first time I saw one of those, I was actually in an engine importer, and it was when I was buying my 2J. Okay, let me be frank, it was my first 2J for my 240. And I saw it on the pallet, and I said, Beams, what's a Beams engine? What's the Beams out of?
It's, I don't know what it's out of, but it's like, I don't really know Toyota engines that well, but yeah, it's like the VTEC engine.
Okay, yeah. They said, oh, you know, it was a engine in Japan. They found it in, you know, a few cars like the Altezza, you know, the cool IS300. It had this cool status for being this high revving, naturally aspirated 4-banger engine by Toyota, and it was considered a pretty advanced engine for the time. Red top Beams motor is a single VVTi. The black top Beams motor is dual overhead cam. It's just a little bit different, but I wouldn't say it's catastrophically different to where you're an idiot for choosing the red top, right? Transmission, It kind of reminds me, I know this is a weird comparison, to like an R154. Kind of reminds me of something like that you find on a 1J car or something like that. So you could tell it's a Toyota transmission. But you have the 3S GTE that you would find in, say, the SW20 and a few other cars. And so, once again, Beam's motor kind of overlooked. But what's really great about this is that it revs over 7,000 RPM, pretty high RPM range, and they're just simply fun to drive. Let's say around 200 horsepower. So 200 horsepower in this car that's fairly light, and you could kind of say it's a baby Supra in a lot of ways. The GT4 especially shared some parts with the Supra, and that's why people nicknamed that. With this one, the steering wheel, you can tell, is from a first generation Mark IV, except this texture right here. RJ calls it the diaper wheel, and I cannot unsee it anymore. All I'm thinking about is Pampers as I hold it down. The biggest thing that reminds you of Supra is the center console when you first get in, because it aims towards the driver, not as aggressively as the Mark IV, but you can definitely tell that Toyota had some good reference points from the Mark IV Supra. Now, comfortability. That's a bad word, comfortability, blah, blah, blah. These seats are factory, they're very comfortable, but you do sit just a little high. And that's not a huge complaint. You don't feel like you're in the car as much as you're on top of the car. We also have a stage 1 XD clutch, and it feels factory. It feels completely fine. I would not know that it's an aftermarket clutch, so XD, good job, it feels really good. Another thing is with these cars, when they went front wheel drive, I think a lot of people lost respect in more of a legendary way. I still think they're really fun, but what's really interesting about the Celica is that you had the Integra, you had the Prelude, you had all these other JDM cars that were front wheel drive that people really, I don't think respected is the right word, but you know, they have this now crazy status now. But the Celica just gets pushed aside because of the GT4, right? The GT4, since it was all-wheel drive, since the option was there, and we never got it. And that just is really sad to me, because I think a lot of people could use this platform and be really pleasantly surprised, because it feels good when you're driving around, good steering input, good steering ratio, it's comfortable. It has a good 90s vibe to it. I mean, look at these seats, dude. Like, it has the pattern that you'd find like an S13 or something like that. It kind of has higher quality than Nissan. Dash is a better material. Everything like holds up. The material in the dash, no cracks, everything. And honestly, I get really stoked when I see one of these on the road because it's rare to see. We also have JDM taillights, which they do look better. Headlights are pretty well put together, but something I never realized about the big 4 eyes on the Celica is that they have this rubber trim around them, and apparently RJ was telling me that they kind of back themselves off over time. They don't necessarily pop off, but they just kind of, you gotta keep up with it essentially. Another thing that's kept people away from the Celica, the price of the parts. So when you buy parts for this car for the transmission and stuff, since it's a pretty niche platform here in the States especially, you're gonna pay a little bit more for the parts. With the GT4 being the turbo engine, a lot of people will take that 3S GT and throw it into this one. Also got nice wheel and tire setup, got these beautiful Koenigs, and the car sits at the perfect ride height, and you don't have to worry about speed bumps, you don't have to worry about any of that. It just drives. You just get to drive it, and it's very nice. And big dip. See, look at that. No problem. It's just really interesting driving this around because the RPM's super smooth. It's a pretty responsive engine for being a naturally aspirated 4-banger from the 90s. And some people K-swap these cars, believe it or not. Okay, guys, I'm gonna say something kind of, okay, controversial, isn't it? But maybe debatable is, I never realized how close VVTi was to the feeling of VTEC. I've never experienced like an all-motor Toyota like 4-banger, so it kicks in almost in a smoother way than VTEC. VTEC has this really aggressive, this is just like this nice. This is so cool. Oh my God, I am in love with this thing. And the thing about it is, since this has an LSD in it, you don't have any torque steer or that much. So you can just rev it out and enjoy it. doing all that with all the drama, having all our fun, we still barely we didn't break the law, which is amazing. What I'm saying is it's one of the most fun 200 horsepower I've ever driven, especially from like a Japanese platform. This is lovely. The beams motor is so smooth. I think that's what's really getting me, is like the smoothness of the engine, how it feels like it's not even breaking a sweat. You can tell that the head and everything's just working super well. So everything is poly, so engine mounts, all that good stuff, and that's why it just takes everything. It feels like a cloud when you accelerate. I'm surprised. I'm not even gonna, like, I'm stuttering because I didn't know how I was gonna feel about this car today. And I don't know, I am guilty. I'm so guilty of not giving this Celica a chance because it wasn't the cool one, because it was front wheel drive, because in the US it was, but I'm gonna highly recommend people do a beam swap now. Like if they have a light JDM car from the 90s, this engine's awesome. And sure, you're not gonna get the turbo sounds and all that, but sometimes just a naturally aspirated car is just fun, and it just feels good. Dude, yeah, it's... So the gearing's pretty long. For an all-motor 4-cylinder, the gearing is very long. So first gear goes to around 40, second gear goes to around 60. With a red line of 7250, it's dramatic, it sounds good, and the beams motor is not too raspy. I was really scared of this all-motor beehive, like B-series, like, I'm just gonna say it. The 2.5-inch exhaust really helps, but at the same time, I don't know, I think it's just the layout and how the headers are, just... I feel like I'm driving a baby Supra. I'm not even kidding, because like you see the wing at the back when you look at the rear view mirror. Here's the thing about the beams motor. It has a nice deep tone for an all-motor 4-cylinder. Oh yeah. That row out of just letting it go and letting it be a smooth, serene beams experience. It's hard to argue with. It's still really fun to drive because you're just kind of along for the ride, if that makes sense. And it's like a nice cruiser, right? It's just a good looking Japanese cruiser that I really hope that these turn into classics one day. I personally hope it does. And I think they're on their way there. Once the GT4 vibe gets like really intensely, I think a lot more people are gonna look at this as a chassis and start modifying it. Oh, okay, you were about to catch air, dog. Yeah. There's a C5 Corvette that just passed me and they were about to go to the moon. Well, ladies and gents, what did you think about the Toyota Celica 6th Gen with the beam swap? My guy, I had more fun in this car than I ever imagined, and I have a whole new respect for the beams engine. So on that note, I upload on Tuesdays, Thursdays, and Sundays, and I'll see you guys next time. Take it easy. Beams. Front wheel drive. That's the one time I noticed it. Goodbye. Big announcement. Super proud to announce my first ever merch collection over at ThatDudeinBlue.com with designs I'm super proud of. So for my first ever collection, make sure to head over to ThatDudeinBlue.com and consider supporting the channel. And thanks so much for the support.